Hi, my name is Billy Naden. I'm a Master's of Data Science student at SMU, and today I wanted to present an exploratory data analysis I did regarding Anheuser-Busch and the possibility of launching a new beer. So the first thing we did was try and examine the breweries by state. So here you'll see a graph of all 50 states with the number of breweries in the state. As you can see, Colorado and California are the two largest states in terms of number of breweries, but there's also states like Massachusetts and Oregon, which also have a lot of breweries. And then there's some states like North Dakota, South Dakota, some of your states in the Midwest that don't have nearly as many breweries, and perhaps there's an opportunity there for a larger company to release some beer. We also explored out of our data set what was missing. So we had 2,692 different beers that we had in our data set. 62 of those beers were missing ABVs, and 1,005 of them were missing IBUs, which does affect our data analysis a bit. As you can see, the median ABV by state, so some of these states are above 0.06, some of them slightly below. Utah is actually the lowest median ABV, perhaps unsurprisingly when we think about the cultural makeup of Utah. And then you have places like DC, Kentucky, and West Virginia, which have some of the highest median ABVs. And perhaps that's because they have a history of hard liquor and kind of have mixed that in with the craft beers, where you're starting to see some whiskey or bourbon infused craft beers in those states. Also here we see the median IBUs. Unfortunately, none of the South Dakota beers had IBUs listed, which is why you see that bar is blank. But as you can see, the two highest would be Maine and West Virginia. Typically, this is speaking about the bitterness of a beer. So those states tend to have higher bitterness, whereas somewhere like Kansas or Missouri is usually a less bitter beer on average. So that helps us understand the taste profile of these states and what beers people tend to like. The top ABV beer we found is the Lee Hill Series number 5, or volume 5, excuse me, which is Upslope Brewing Company in Boulder, Colorado. It's a whopping 12.8% ABV, which is roughly 3 times that of a Coors Light or a Bud Light, your typical macro brewery American lager, and is a Belgian-style quadruple ale. So obviously the style is from Belgium, even though the beer itself is from Colorado. The top IBU beer is the Bitter Bitch Imperial IPA from Astoria Brewing Company in Astoria, Oregon. It's 138 IBUs, and it's an American Double or Imperial IPA. So it's a darker IPA. It's going to have a really bitter taste. For ABV, we saw a minimum of 0.01 and a max of 12.8. But really, the interesting part is the peaks of this data set, right? So mean of almost 6%, medium of 5.6%, so right around that 5.5 range. But you see peaks right before 5% and right after 5%, which is consistent with the ABVs of like a lighter lager, which are typically between 4 and 5%, and then your slightly heavier beer, which will be kind of in the 6% range. So unsurprising if you understand the craft brewery scene, but definitely interesting to view graphically. And then, as we can see here, the ABV and IBU correlation, these two appear to be positively correlated. And you can see here that as a beer gets more alcoholic, it typically gets more bitter as well. And that's where you start to see some of your double IPAs and things like that, your darker IPAs that have a higher ABV. The other thing we did was classify by ale, IPA, and other. So as you can see, the ales and the others are kind of, mixed in at the bottom here. But your IPAs tend to be your higher ABV and higher IBU beers. So that's kind of how we classified these beers. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening, and really appreciate you taking the time.